Sometimes the greatest acts of kindness come from those who have the least to give. In the frozen mountains of Wyoming, a poor ranch hand and his loyal donkey are about to discover that saving a stranger can change everything. 62-year-old Eli Boone has spent his entire life working other men's land, content with his simple cabin and faithful companion, Clementine. When he finds a woman trapped in a carriage wreck during a brutal snowstorm, he doesn't hesitate to help, even though she can't walk and won't say who she is. What Eli doesn't know is that this mysterious woman is hiding a secret that will transform his world forever. But will her past catch up before spring arrives? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The wind had teeth that morning. Eli Boone felt them bite through his canvas coat as he stepped out onto the porch, coffee mug warming his calloused hands. November in the Wyoming high country didn't ease you into winter. It grabbed you by the collar and shook hard. Behind him, inside the cabin, the wood stove ticked and popped, settling into its morning work. Eli took a slow sip of coffee, black and strong enough to wake the dead, and surveyed his small kingdom. The corral fence needed mending before the heavy snows came. The roof had a leak near the chimney that wanted attention. The henhouse door hung crooked on its hinges. A man could spend his whole life fixing things that wanted fixing, Eli thought. And he had. 62 years on this earth, 40 of them spent working ranches that belonged to other men. His hands bore the map of that life, scars from barbed wire, crooked fingers broken and healed wrong, calluses thick as leather. But they were honest hands. They'd built fences, delivered calves, chopped enough wood to heat a small town. They'd held his wife's hand the day they married, and again the day she died. 15 years since Sarah passed. Sometimes it felt like 15 minutes, other times like a whole different lifetime. From the lean-to behind the cabin came a sound that made Eli smile, despite the cold gnawing at his bones. A long, complaining bray that echoed off the pine-covered slopes. Clementine was awake and announcing her displeasure with the weather, or the hour, or simply the general state of being a donkey, expected to rise before the sun had properly cleared the mountains. "I hear you, old girl," Eli called. "Patience never was your virtue." He finished his coffee in 3 long swallows, set the mug on the porch rail, and made his way across the yard. Frost crunched beneath his boots. The sky overhead held that peculiar gray weight that promised snow, and soon. The aspens on the ridgeline had already surrendered their leaves, standing skeletal against the dark bulk of the evergreens. Clementine stood at the fence of her small paddock, ears forward, dark eyes watching his approach with what Eli always thought looked like skepticism. She was 18 years old, ancient for a donkey, but still sturdy, still ornery, still the best companion a man could ask for. Her winter coat had come in thick and shaggy, grey at the muzzle now, but she moved well enough when the mood struck her. "Morning, Clem," Eli said, reaching out to scratch between her long ears. She leaned into his hand, making that soft huffing sound that passed for contentment. "We got weather coming." "I can feel it in my knees." The donkey bumped her head against his chest, and Eli pulled a withered apple from his coat pocket. He'd been saving it for this moment, and Clementine took it delicately, her warm breath steaming in the cold air. He'd bought her from a man down in Sheridan 17 years ago, when his Sarah was still alive. The fellow had been trying to get rid of her, said she was stubborn and useless. Eli had looked into those dark eyes and seen something he recognized, a creature that had been worked hard and thanked little, but who still had dignity. He'd paid $40 he couldn't afford, led her home, and never regretted it once. Sarah had loved Clementine. Used to bring her carrots and talk to her about things she didn't want to burden Eli with. Women, troubles, worries about their daughter Margaret, fears about the cancer that was already starting its quiet work inside her. Clementine had stood patient as a priest in a confessional, those long ears taking it all in. After Sarah died, Clementine had been the thing that got Eli out of bed some mornings. Animals need tending regardless of grief. There's a mercy in that. Eli forked hay into the feeder and checked the water trough. A skin of ice had formed overnight, and he broke it with his fist, the cold shock of it barely registering anymore. The chickens in their coop needed feeding next. Then he'd ride out to check the fence line in the north. Pasture. Mr. Harlan paid him $300, a month plus use of the cabin to keep an eye on this piece of land, 40 acres of high country that neighbored Harlan's main ranch down in the valley. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Eli had learned long ago that enough was a blessing some men never found. Inside the cabin, Eli fried eggs and ate them with toast and jam, standing at the counter. The place was small, one main room that served as kitchen, living area and bedroom, with a lean-to added on for storage and a privy out back. He'd lived in worse. He'd lived in better too, back when Sarah was alive and they'd rented a little house in town. But after she passed and Margaret stopped speaking to him, that was a wound that hadn't healed. Eli had wanted distance from people and their complications. Up here life made sense. Work, eat, sleep, repeat. The seasons turned. The mountains didn't judge you. The silence didn't ask questions you couldn't answer. On the rough pine table sat the one thing Eli had from his father, a silver pocket watch with a cracked crystal and hands that hadn't moved in 30 years. Eli picked it up, feeling its weight, running his thumb over the engraved initials on the back, J.T.B. James Thomas Boone. His father had carried it every day until the stroke took him at 59. Eli had meant to get it repaired, but somehow the years had slipped past, and now it seemed right that it stayed broken. A reminder that time moved whether you were ready or not. He tucked the watch back into his shirt pocket, where he carried it always, and pulled on his warmest coat. Outside, the wind had picked up, coming from the north now, steady and cold. Definitely snow coming. Maybe by afternoon. Eli saddled Clementine. She tolerated the saddle better than most donkeys, and they set out toward the high pass. The trail climbed through stands of lodgepole pine and Douglas fir, winding around granite outcroppings that looked like the bones of the earth pushing through. Clementine picked her way with care, never rushing, always sure-footed. Eli had learned to trust her judgment. More than once, she'd balked at a trail he thought looked fine, and he'd found washouts or deadfalls just ahead. They were partners, him and this donkey, both getting old, both a little worse for wear, both still showing up for the work. The north pasture fence ran along a ridge that offered a view clear down into the valley. On clear days, you could see Mr. Harlan's big house, the barns, the main herd. Today, the valley was lost in grey mist, and the wind carried the smell of snow. Eli checked the fence line, found it solid, and was about to turn back when Clementine stopped dead in her tracks. Her ears swiveled forward, focused on something up the trail. Eli listened. At first he heard nothing but wind in the pines. Then it came. Faint, almost lost in the weather, a sound that didn't belong. Metal on stone, the creak of wood under stress, and maybe, just maybe, a voice. Eli touched his heels to Clementine's sides. "Come on, girl. Easy now." They rounded a bend in the trail and Eli's breath caught. 50 yards ahead, just before the trail narrowed to cross a steep ravine, a horse-drawn carriage lay on its side like a wounded animal. One wheel was shattered. The horse was gone, probably ran off or broke free, and from inside the tilted carriage came a sound that made Eli's chest tighten. Someone crying. Soft, desperate, trying to be quiet but failing. He dismounted and ground-tied Clementine, approaching slowly. "Hello in there," he called.
"Anyone hurt?"
The crying stopped. A moment of silence, then a woman's voice shaking with cold or fear or both. "Please, I need help. I can't move my legs." Eli quickened his pace, careful on the icy ground. The carriage was expensive, city-made, with polished brass fixtures and painted sides now scraped and dented. It had slid part way off the trail, the back end hanging over the ravine. One good push, and it would tumble. He reached the door, now facing skyward, and pulled it open. Inside, wedged against the far wall, was a woman. She was younger than him, maybe 45, 50 at most, with dark hair streaked with grey and eyes wide with panic. She wore a long wool coat, fine quality, and her face bore the pallor of someone who'd been cold and frightened for too long. "I've got you," Eli said, making his voice steady and calm. "You're safe now. Can you tell me what happened?" "The horse bolted," she whispered. "Lightning spooked him, I think, and the driver—" Her voice broke. "The driver fell. I don't know where. I couldn't see. Then we crashed, and I can't feel my legs. I can't move them." Eli's mind worked quickly. The carriage was unstable. Moving her would be risky if her back was injured, but leaving her here with a storm coming wasn't an option. "And if she couldn't walk, what's your name?" he asked. "Lily." She said it quickly, then seemed to catch herself. "Just Lily." "All right, Lily, I'm Eli Boone. I'm going to get you out of here, but I need to do it careful-like. This carriage isn't sitting safe, and if you've hurt your back, we don't want to make it worse. You understand?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you." "Oh God, thank you." The rescue took the better part of an hour. Eli worked methodically, using rope from his saddlebag to stabilize the carriage first. He fashioned a makeshift harness and got Clementine positioned to keep tension on the vehicle while he climbed inside. Lily was trembling, going into shock maybe, and he wrapped her in his coat before carefully lifting her free. She weighed less than he expected. When he cradled her in his arms, she felt fragile, like something already broken. Her legs hung limp, and when he touched them to check for bleeding or obvious breaks, she shook her head. "I can't feel it. I can't feel anything below my waist." "We'll get you warm," Eli said. First things first. Getting her onto Clementine's back while he walked alongside took patience and ingenuity. Lily was conscious but fading, exhaustion and hypothermia taking their toll. Eli tied her to the saddle to keep her from falling, then led the donkey back down the mountain trail as the first snowflakes began to spiral from the gray sky. By the time they reached the cabin, the snow was falling in earnest, thick flakes that erased the world behind them. Eli carried Lily inside, laid her on his bed, the only bed, and stoked the fire until the stove glowed red. He brought blankets, wrapped her tight, then stood back and assessed. She was drifting in and out of consciousness. Her hands were blue with cold. But she was breathing steady, and that was something. Eli filled a kettle with water and set it on the stove, then pulled a chair close to the bed. Outside, the wind howled and the snow fell harder. They were snowed in now, no question. The pass would be impassable by morning. Whatever help Lily needed, whatever had brought her to that mountain road in a fancy carriage, it would have to wait. For now, she was his responsibility. He looked at her pale face, at the way her eyes moved behind closed lids like she was dreaming or remembering, and wondered who she was running from. Because that's what people did in fancy carriages on remote mountain passes in November. They ran. From the lean-to, Clementine brayed, safe in her shelter. The cabin creaked against the wind, and Eli Boone, who had spent 15 years learning to live alone, found himself suddenly responsible for another human life. "All right," he said softly, more to himself than to her. "All right, Lily, just Lily. Let's see if we can keep you alive." Lily woke in the small hours before dawn, gasping like she'd surfaced from deep water. Eli heard her from his place on the floor near the stove and was on his feet before she could cry out. "Easy now," he said, keeping his voice low and steady. "You're safe. You're in my cabin." Her eyes darted around the dim room, taking in the rough-hewn walls, the glowing stove, the unfamiliar ceiling beams. When her gaze found him, fear flickered across her face. Then something else, resignation maybe, or exhaustion too deep for more panic. "I can't." She tried to sit up, then fell back against the pillow with a sound of frustration. "My legs! I still can't feel them." "I know." Eli moved to the bedside, pulled the chair close. "You told me yesterday. Do you remember? The carriage accident up on the high pass?" She closed her eyes, and he watched her face work through the memory. "The driver," she whispered. "Did you find him?" "Not yet. Storm came in hard. I'll look when the weather breaks, but—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. If he fell far, and if he was hurt, the cold would have taken him quick. "I'm sorry." Lily turned her face toward the wall. Her shoulders shook, but she made no sound. Eli had seen that kind of grief before. The sort that went too deep for tears, or maybe had used them all up already. He stood and moved to the stove, giving her space. The kettle still held hot water from the night before, and he made tea, strong and sweet. When he brought it to her, she'd composed herself, though her eyes were red. "Can you sit up if I help you?" She nodded, and he slipped an arm behind her shoulders, lifting her gently. She was light, too light, and when he arranged the pillows to support her, he noticed how her fine coat had hidden a frame gone thin. Not from poverty. The quality of her clothes told a different story, but from something else. Illness, maybe, or the kind of stress that ate away at a person from the inside. She took the tea in both hands, grateful for the warmth. For a long moment they sat in silence, the only sounds the pop of burning wood and the howl of wind outside. "Thank you," she said finally, "for saving me. She gestured vaguely at the cabin, the bed, the tea. "For all of this." "No thanks needed." Eli settled back in his chair. "Anyone would have done the same." "No." Her voice was firm. Most people wouldn't have. Most people would have kept riding, told themselves it wasn't their problem." She met his eyes. "You're a good man, Eli Boone." He didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. After a moment, he asked, "Where were you headed?" "In that carriage." Lily's hands tightened on the cup. "Away," she said. "Just away." "From what? Does it matter?" The sharpness in her voice surprised them both. She softened immediately. "I'm sorry. I don't mean to be rude. You saved my life. But I can't talk about it, not yet. Maybe not ever." Eli studied her. She was scared. That much was clear. Not of him, but of something else, something she'd been running from when the accident happened. And whatever it was, it had her looking over her shoulder even now, in a cabin at the end of the world, with a stranger who'd pulled her from a wrecked carriage. "All right," he said. "You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to. But you should know we're snowed in. That storm last night, it dropped maybe 18 inches, and there's more coming. The pass won't be clear for weeks, maybe not until spring thaw. And even if it was, getting you down to a doctor." He shook his head. "Clementine's a good donkey, but she can't carry 2 people through deep snow, not with one of them unable to hold on." The color drained from Lily's face. "Spring? But that's months away. 3, maybe 4. He watched her process this, saw the panic rise, and then, through what looked like considerable effort, saw her push it back down. "I've got supplies. Enough food for 1, which means it'll stretch for 2 if we're careful. Plenty of firewood. We'll manage. You don't understand." Her voice cracked. "People will be looking for me. When they find that carriage, they'll think you died." Eli said it gently but plainly. "If you went over in the wreck, or if you wandered off in the storm, that's what they'll think." She stared at him, and he saw her working through the implications. Slowly, something changed in her expression. The fear was still there, but underneath it, something else emerged, something that looked almost like relief. "Maybe that's not the worst thing," she said quietly. They fell into an uneasy routine over the next 3 days. The storm continued, relentless, piling snow against the cabin walls and turning the world outside into a white void. Eli tended to the animals. Clementine safe in her lean-to, the chickens huddled in their coop and kept the fire burning. He cooked simple meals, oatmeal for breakfast, soup and bread for supper, tea throughout the day. Lily remained in the bed, her paralyzed legs a constant weight beneath the blankets. Eli had examined them as best he could without causing her too much embarrassment. No visible breaks, no swelling or discoloration. Whatever had happened in the crash, it seemed to be her spine that had taken the damage. Whether temporary or permanent, he couldn't say. He wasn't a doctor. She slept fitfully, often waking with cries that she tried to muffle in the pillow. In those moments, Eli would speak softly from his bedroll by the stove, telling her where she was, that she was safe, until her breathing settled. During the day, she watched him with an intensity that made him self-conscious. He wasn't used to being watched, wasn't used to conversation beyond what he shared with Clementine, and the occasional exchange with Mr. Harlan when the rancher came to check on things. On the 4th morning, Lily asked him about the pocket watch. He'd been winding it, an old habit, even though it didn't work, when he noticed her watching. My father's, he said, holding it up so she could see. Quit running about 30 years ago. I keep meaning to get it fixed, but, he shrugged, time gets away from a person. May I see it? He brought it to her, and she turned it over in her hands, studying the engraving, the cracked crystal, the frozen hands pointing to 317. It's beautiful, she said. Even broken, maybe especially broken. Eli surprised himself by saying it. Things that are broken have stories. This watch, it saw my father through the Depression, through the war, through raising 5 kids on a ranch that barely kept us fed. When he had his stroke, this is what they gave me. Not money, not land, just this watch that didn't work anymore. He paused. Seemed fitting somehow. Time stopped for him and the watch knew it. Lily handed it back carefully, like it was precious. You talk about him with love. He was a good man. Stern but fair. Taught me to work hard and keep my word. Can't ask for much more from a father. You're lucky. There was something wistful in her voice. My father, she stopped. Seemed to realize she was revealing something she'd meant to keep hidden. Never mind, but Eli had heard the pain there, raw and unhealed. It wasn't kind to you. He was very kind. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. He was kind right up until the moment he sold my future to the highest bidder. All very civilized, very proper. That's how it's done in certain circles. You're talking about marriage. I'm talking about business arrangements, dressed up as marriage. The bitterness in her voice was sharp enough to cut. Sorry, I shouldn't. I'm your guest. I shouldn't burden you with old grievances. Burden away, Eli said. Not like either of us is going anywhere. She laughed at that, a startled sound that turned into something like a sob. When she'd composed herself, she said, I don't think I've laughed in months, maybe longer. Well? Eli stood, tucked the watch back in his pocket. Seems like you're due then. That afternoon, while Lily dozed, Eli stood at the window and watched the snow fall. The world had shrunk to just this cabin, this small circle of warmth in an ocean of cold. Somewhere out there, beyond the storm, people were looking for Lily, or maybe they weren't. Maybe they'd already written her off as dead. As she'd said, either way, she was here now, and she was his responsibility. He'd pulled her from that wreck, brought her to his home, and now her survival depended on him. It was a weight he hadn't expected to carry again, not after Sarah died, not after Margaret left, but some weights, he thought. You didn't get to choose. They chose you. Behind him, Lily stirred and called his name softly. When he turned, she was looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Gratitude, yes, but something else too. Something like wonder. What is it? He asked. I was just thinking, she said, that I should be terrified right now. Stranded with a stranger, unable to walk, cut off from everything I know. But I'm not. I don't know why, but I'm not afraid. Not of you. Eli didn't know what to say to that either. So he just nodded and went back to watching the snow erase the world outside. The storm finally broke on the 5th day, leaving behind a world transformed. Snow lay heavy on the pines, bending branches into arches and turning the familiar landscape into something strange and beautiful. The sun came out, brilliant against all that white, and Eli had to squint against the glare as he dug a path from the cabin door to the lean-to. Clementine greeted him with her usual complaint, a long bray that said she'd been patient long enough and expected compensation. He fed her extra hay and spent time brushing her coat, talking to her the way he always did about nothing and everything. Got a house guest now, he told the donkey. Woman named Lily. Can't walk, won't say where she came from, but she's got good manners and she doesn't eat much. We'll manage. Clementine regarded him with those dark, knowing eyes, and Eli could have sworn she looked skeptical. Inside, Lily was awake and sitting up against the pillows. She'd managed to braid her hair, a small act of self-care that Eli took as a good sign. Over the past few days, he'd seen her move through stages of shock and grief, anger and resignation. This morning, she looked almost calm. The storm stopped, she observed as he stamped snow from his boots. For now. There'll be more. He hung his coat on the peg by the door. But the sun's nice while it lasts. I could open the shutters, let some light in. I'd like that. He unlatched the wooden shutters and pushed them wide. Sunlight flooded the cabin, making Lily blink and shield her eyes. When they adjusted, she turned her face toward the window like a flower seeking sun. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "I'd forgotten how beautiful winter can be. You from somewhere warm?" "No, somewhere busy." She smiled faintly. "Somewhere where you don't look at snow. You look at traffic, at schedules, at—" She stopped herself. Somewhere else. Eli had learned not to push when she deflected. Instead, he busied himself with breakfast, oatmeal with dried apples and a drizzle of honey. He'd found an old wooden tray in the storage lean-to, something left by the cabin's previous occupant, and he cleaned it up to serve her meals. It had a rim carved around the edge, simple but carefully done, and when Lily ran her fingers over it, she seemed pleased by the craftsmanship. The tray became her table, her connection to normalcy. Eli would bring her breakfast, and they'd eat together, him at the table, her in the bed, with surprisingly easy conversation. She asked him about the ranch, about Clementine, about the mountains. He asked her about books she'd read, places she'd been. They talked around the gaps in her story like two people dancing around holes in a floor, careful not to fall through. "Tell me about your wife," Lily said one morning, about a week into her stay. "If you don't mind." Eli set down his coffee cup. He minded, but not in the way he expected to. Usually when people asked about Sarah, it felt like they were picking at a wound. With Lily, it felt different, like she understood something about loss. "Her name was Sarah," he began. "We met when I was 23 and she was 19. I was working her father's ranch, and she brought lunch out to the hands. Prettiest thing I'd ever seen, and smart as a whip. We got married 6 months later. That's fast. When you know, you know." He smiled at the memory. Her daddy wasn't pleased, wanted her to marry a rancher, not a ranch hand. But Sarah, she had a stubborn streak. Said she'd marry who she loved, and what she loved was me. He paused, the smile fading. "We had 37 years together. Had a daughter, Margaret. Scraped by on not much, but we were happy. Then the cancer came, and..." He stopped, the old grief rising up. It took her slow. 2 years of slow. That was 15 years ago, and some days it feels like yesterday. Lily's eyes were wet. "I'm so sorry. Life goes on. That's what it does, whether you want it to or not. And your daughter, Margaret?" Eli's jaw tightened. This wound was fresher, still bled when touched. "We don't talk. Haven't for 10 years, since just after her mother died. She wanted me to move to Denver, live with her and her husband. I wanted to stay here in the mountains." We had words. Hard words. He stared into his coffee. "She said I was choosing isolation over family. Maybe she was right, but I couldn't live in a city, in a house that wasn't mine, being somebody's burden. So I stayed and she left, and neither of us has bent enough to fix it." "It's not too late," Lily said gently. "To reach out. Maybe, but pride's a powerful thing, and I've got plenty of it. So does she." He stood, needing to move, to do something. "Anyway, that's the story. Not much of one, but it's mine. It's a good story. Eli, an honest one." He busied himself with washing dishes. But her words stayed with him. Honest. When was the last time someone had called him honest? When was the last time anyone had looked at his life and seen something worthwhile, instead of something wasted? That afternoon, he helped Lily try to move her legs. It was her idea. She'd been lying still for over a week, and the fear of permanent paralysis had started to show in her eyes. Eli didn't know much about medicine, but he knew that hope mattered, even if it was built on shaky ground. "Tell me if you feel anything," he said, placing his hands on her right ankle. "I'm going to try to bend your knee." He moved her leg carefully, watching her face. She bit her lip, concentrating, but finally shook her head. "Nothing. I can see it moving, but I can't feel it." They tried the left leg. Same result. By the end of it, Lily was trembling with frustration, and Eli saw tears threatening. "Don't give up yet," he said. "Bodies have their own timeline. My daddy broke his back falling off a horse when I was 12. Doctors said he'd never walk again. Took him 9 months, but he proved them wrong." 9 months. Lily's voice was hollow. "I don't have 9 months. Why not?" She looked at him then, really looked at him, and he saw fear and something else, desperation. "Because when spring comes, when the snow melts, they'll find me. And when they do, she stopped, shook her head. I can't explain. I just can't. You're running from someone, Eli said. It wasn't a question. Yes, someone who hurt you. Someone who will. She turned away. Please, Eli, don't ask me more than that. Not yet. He wanted to press, wanted to understand what had put that fear in her eyes. But he'd given her his word that she didn't have to tell him anything, and Eli Boone kept his word. All right, he said. But Lily, whoever they are, they're not here. You're safe for now. Let that be enough. She nodded, but he could see she didn't quite believe it. And as he went outside to chop more wood, to give her privacy and himself time to think, Eli wondered what he'd gotten himself into. This woman wasn't just running from trouble. She was running from something big, something that scared her more than paralysis, more than being stranded in the wilderness with a stranger. He brought his axe down on a log, splitting it clean. The sharp crack echoed off the mountains, and somewhere in the distance, Clementine answered with a bray that sounded almost like a warning. December came in with bitter cold and shorter days. The sun rose late and set early, leaving long hours of darkness that Eli filled with small tasks and quiet conversation. He'd moved his bedroll closer to the stove, giving Lily more privacy, though in a one-room cabin privacy was a relative thing. They developed an unspoken etiquette. He'd turn his back when she needed to wash or change clothes. She'd close her eyes when he did the same. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. The carved wooden tray became more than just a way to serve meals. Lily had begun asking Eli to bring her things, a book from the small shelf he kept, his father's Bible with its worn leather cover, even his whittling knife and a piece of pine. She couldn't walk, couldn't leave the bed, except when Eli carried her to the chair by the stove for an hour each day. But she could keep her hands busy. I used to do woodwork, she said one evening, turning a small piece of pine over in her hands. A long time ago, before she caught herself, that familiar hesitation when she got close to revealing too much. Before life got complicated, what did you make? Small things. Toys for children, boxes, ornaments. My father had a workshop, and when I was young he'd let me watch him work. Eventually he taught me. Her fingers traced the grain of the wood. I wasn't very good, but I loved it. The smell of sawdust, the feel of the wood taking shape. It was peaceful. Eli handed her his knife. Well, you've got plenty of time now. Make whatever you want. She took the knife carefully, testing its weight, its sharpness. For the next hour, she worked in silence, her brow furrowed in concentration. Eli pretended to read, but he watched her from the corner of his eye. When she worked, something changed in her face. The fear receded, replaced by a focused calm that made her look younger, less burdened. By the time the fire burned low and Eli banked it for the night, she'd shaped the pine into something recognizable, a small donkey, rough but charming, with long ears and a patient expression. It's Clementine, she said, holding it up. Or at least it's supposed to be. Eli took the carving, turned it over in his hands. The proportions weren't quite right, and the details were simple, but there was something alive in it. Something that captured Clementine's essential stubbornness. She'd be honored, he said. Can I keep it? Lily looked surprised. It's not very good. It's good enough. He set it on the shelf next to his father's pocket watch. Thank you. That night, lying on his bedroll, Eli listened to the wind howl outside and thought about the small wooden donkey on his shelf. It was the first gift anyone had given him in years. The first thing anyone had made for him since Sarah used to knit him scarves that he still kept in a trunk, too precious to wear and risk wearing out. It was just a simple carving, rough and imperfect. But it mattered. The next day brought news from the outside world, though not in any way Eli had expected. He was checking his snare line in the woods behind the cabin when he found tracks, human tracks, fairly fresh, leading up toward the high pass, then doubling back. Someone had been up here, walking the trail where the carriage had crashed. Eli followed the tracks for a ways, his heart picking up speed. They were too large to be a woman's, and the stride was long, purposeful. Someone looking for something, or someone. When he returned to the cabin, he said nothing to Lily, but he made sure to bar the door that night and kept his rifle close. If someone was searching for her, They might come back. And if they did, Eli needed to be ready to decide whose side he was on. The choice should have been obvious. Return her to whoever was looking, collect any reward that might be offered, go back to his quiet life. But when he looked at Lily, at the way she'd started to smile more often, at how the panic in her eyes had begun to fade, he knew it wasn't that simple. She was healing here, in ways that had nothing to do with her legs. Eli, her voice pulled him from his thoughts. Is something wrong? You've been distant all evening. He debated, lying, then decided against it. If someone was coming, she deserved to know. Found tracks today. Human tracks, up near where the carriage went over. Someone's been looking around. The color drained from her face. How recent? Day or two, maybe. Could have been just a hunter or someone from the valley checking the trails. But you don't think so? She'd pulled the blanket tight around her shoulders, her knuckles white. I don't know what to think. But I thought you should know. For a long moment she was silent. Then quietly she said, his name is Marcus. She struggled with the word. My husband. If someone's looking for me, it's him. Eli sat down in the chair by her bed. Tell me. I don't know where to start. Start anywhere. I'm not going anywhere, and neither are you. She took a breath, let it out slowly. We've been married 20 years. 20 years of... She paused, choosing her words. He's not a bad man, Eli. That's the worst part. He's charming, successful, admired by everyone who knows him. But he's also controlling, suffocating. Every decision I make, every friend I have, every thought in my head, he wants to own it all. And somewhere along the way, I lost myself completely. I became Mrs. Marcus Grayson instead of Lily. That's why you ran. I tried to leave properly, through lawyers, through divorce. But Marcus, he has resources, connections. Every lawyer I approached would suddenly be unavailable. My bank accounts would freeze. My credit cards would stop working. He made it clear that if I left, I'd leave with nothing. No money, no friends, no life. Her voice hardened. So I planned to disappear instead. I hired that driver, arranged everything in secret, and I ran. The accident, maybe it was an accident. Or maybe Marcus found out and she shook her head. I don't know. I'll probably never know. But if he's having people search these mountains, if he thinks I might still be alive, he can't have you. Eli said it firmly, surprising himself with his vehemence. Not unless you want to go back. I don't. The words came out fierce, desperate. I'd rather die up here than go back to that life. Eli thought about the tracks in the snow, about what it meant to harbor someone's wife, about all the ways this could go wrong. Then he thought about Sarah, about how she'd had the courage to defy her father and marry for love, about how some things mattered more than playing it safe. Then you won't, he said. If anyone comes asking, you were never here. The carriage went over. The woman inside died or wandered off and froze. Simple as that. Tears spilled down Lily's cheeks. Why would you do that? You don't even know me. I know enough. He stood, moved to the window, looked out at the dark shapes of mountains against the starlit sky. I know you're scared. I know you're brave. I know you carved a donkey that made me smile. And I haven't smiled much these past few years. That's enough! Behind him he heard her crying softly, not from fear this time, but from something else. Relief, maybe. Or gratitude so deep it hurt. Outside, the temperature dropped and the stars burned cold and bright. Tomorrow Eli would cover those tracks, would make sure no trail led back to his cabin. Tomorrow he'd become an accomplice to whatever Lily was running from. But tonight he'd given his word to protect her, and that was enough. The days grew shorter, and the cold deeper as December wore on. Christmas came and went without much ceremony. Eli carved a small pine tree from wood, and Lily decorated it with scraps of cloth torn into ribbons. They shared a meal of venison stew and cornbread, and Lily sang a carol in a voice that surprised him with its beauty. My mother taught me that one, she said when she finished. Back when I was small enough to believe in miracles. You don't believe anymore? She looked at him across the candlelight, her face thoughtful. I'm here, aren't I? Alive when I should be dead, safe when I should be found. Maybe I'm starting to believe again. The tracks Eli had found never reappeared, and gradually his vigilance eased. Whoever had been searching had given up or moved on. The snow kept falling, building walls between them and the outside world. And inside the cabin, a different kind of thaw was happening. Lily's legs remained paralyzed, but the rest of her was healing in ways that went beyond the physical. She laughed more often. She asked questions about Eli's life, not prying but genuinely curious. And slowly, carefully, she began to share more of herself. "I used to run a company," she said one evening, while working on another carving. This one was taking shape as a bird, wings spread in flight. 3,000 employees, offices in 12 cities. "I built it from nothing, and then I married Marcus, and he took it. Not legally. Legally it was still mine. But he positioned himself as the public face, made the decisions, pushed me into the background. And I let him because that's what you do when you love someone. You make space for them. Except he took all the space, and I forgot how to take up any room at all." Eli, mending a harness by lamplight, looked up. "What kind of company?" "Technology. Software solutions for hospitals. Tracking systems for medical records. Boring stuff maybe, but it saved lives. Made healthcare more efficient, helped doctors make better decisions." Pride crept into her voice. "I was good at it. Really good. Before I met Marcus, before I became—" She gestured vaguely at herself. "You're still you," Eli said. "Company or no company, husband or no husband. You're still the woman who built all that, am I?" She set down her knife. "Sometimes I don't know anymore. I spent so long being what Marcus needed me to be that I'm not sure who I am underneath. Then maybe this is your chance to find out." She smiled at that, sad but genuine. "In a cabin at the end of the world with a cowboy and his donkey. Not where I expected to find myself. Best things usually aren't expected." Outside, Clementine brayed. Her evening complaint about the cold or the lack of treats or simply the general unfairness of being a donkey in winter. Lily laughed and Eli found himself smiling too. "I should check on her," he said, standing and reaching for his coat. "Eli?" Lily's voice stopped him at the door. "Thank you for not making me feel broken." He didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded and stepped out into the cold. The stars were brilliant overhead. The Milky Way, a river of light across the black sky. Eli stood for a moment, breathing in air so cold it burned, and thought about the strange turn his life had taken. 2 months ago, he'd been alone, had expected to stay alone until the end of his days. Now he had a house guest who was slowly becoming something more, not a burden but a companion, someone to talk to share meals with, to sit in comfortable silence with, while the winter wind howled outside. It was temporary, he reminded himself. When spring came, she'd leave. She'd have to. She had a life out there, a company, even if she'd walked away from it. And he'd go back to his solitude, his simple routines, his conversations with Clementine that were really conversations with himself. The thought should have been comforting. Instead, it made him feel cold in a way that had nothing to do with the weather. In the lean-to, Clementine greeted him with a soft huff and accepted the apple he'd brought. He scratched between her ears and talked to her the way he always did. "She's getting stronger," he told the donkey. "Her spirit, anyway. Body's still broken, but her spirit's coming back. You can see it in her eyes." He paused. "I like having her here, Clem. That probably makes me a fool, getting attached to someone who's going to leave. But I can't seem to help it." Clementine regarded him with those dark, knowing eyes. And Eli could have sworn she looked sympathetic. When he returned to the cabin, Lily was asleep, the unfinished bird carving resting on the tray beside her. Eli banked the fire and settled onto his bedroll, but sleep was slow to come. His mind kept turning over the same thoughts. What would happen when spring came? Whether Lily's husband would find her, whether she'd want to stay, even if she could, and underneath it all, a question he was afraid to examine too closely. What did he want? The next morning brought an unexpected gift. When Eli helped Lily from the bed to the chair by the stove, their daily ritual now, to keep her circulation going and give her a change of scenery, she gasped. "What is it?" he asked, alarmed. "My foot. I think I felt something. When you lifted me, I felt—" She looked down at her legs, concentration fierce on her face. "Do it again. Please." Eli carefully touched her right foot, applying gentle pressure. Nothing. He tried the left, and this time Lily's eyes went wide. There, I felt that. Not much, just like a tingle, like my foot's asleep and starting to wake up. But I felt it. They spent the next hour testing, touching, trying to provoke more sensation. It was inconsistent. Sometimes she felt something, sometimes nothing. But it was there, undeniable proof that the paralysis might not be permanent. Lily cried when they finally stopped, but this time the tears were different. These were tears of hope, fragile and precious as new snow. "It's coming back," she whispered. "Oh God, Eli, it's coming back." He wanted to caution her, to tell her not to hope too much, too soon. But when he looked at her face, radiant with possibility, he couldn't bring himself to dim that light. Instead, he squeezed her hand and said, "One step at a time," literally. She laughed through her tears, and Eli thought that might be the most beautiful sound he'd ever heard. That night, after Lily had fallen asleep, Eli sat by the window and watched the stars wheel overhead. Inside his chest, something he'd thought long dead was stirring back to life. It felt like hope. It felt dangerous. It felt like standing on the edge of something vast and terrifying and wonderful all at once. He pulled his father's watch from his pocket and held it, feeling its familiar weight. Time had stopped for this watch 30 years ago, and it had stayed stopped frozen at 3:17. But time didn't really stop, did it? It just kept moving, whether you were ready or not, carrying you forward into futures you couldn't predict or prepare for. Eli looked at the sleeping woman in his bed, at the small carved donkey on his shelf, at the life that had been simple and empty and now was complicated and full. "All right, Sarah," he whispered to his long-dead wife. "I don't know what I'm doing here, but I'm going to trust it anyway." Outside, the wind answered with a sound that might have been approval or warning. Eli chose to hear it as the former. January arrived, with temperatures so cold that frost formed on the inside of the cabin windows. Eli woke before dawn each day to feed the fire, his breath visible in the dim light. The world outside had become a study in white and grey, snow piled so deep that even getting to the lean-to required tunneling a path. But inside the cabin, something was blooming. Lily's sensation was returning gradually, unpredictably. Some days she could feel pressure on her feet, other days nothing. Eli helped her with exercises, gentle movements, careful stretches that left her exhausted but determined. She refused to give up hope, even when progress stalled or reversed. "It's like learning to walk all over again," she said one afternoon, frustration evident in her voice. They'd been working for an hour, and she'd managed to wiggle her toes on her left foot. Not much, but something. Except babies don't remember what it was like before. They don't know what they're missing. "Maybe that makes you stronger," Eli said. "You know what you're fighting for." She looked at him, and something passed between them, a moment of connection that went deeper than words. Over the past weeks, the space between them had been slowly closing. Conversations lasted longer. Silences felt comfortable instead of awkward. When Eli carried her from the bed to the chair each morning, his hands lingering perhaps a moment longer than necessary, neither of them acknowledged it. But both of them felt it. "Tell me about your daughter," Lily said later while Eli prepared supper. "Margaret, you said you haven't spoken in 10 years. Eli's hands paused in their work. "Not much to tell that I haven't already said. I don't believe that. 10 years is a long time to stay angry." He resumed chopping vegetables, the knife striking the board with steady rhythm. "She's got her life in Denver." "Good job. Nice husband. Probably has kids by now." "I wouldn't know. You could write to her and say what? That I'm sorry for choosing my pride over my daughter. That I'm a stubborn old fool who'd rather live alone on a mountain than admit he was wrong." The knife came down harder. "She knows all that already." Lily was quiet for a moment. Then gently, "She might forgive you if you asked." "Might or might not. That's a lot of risk for a man my age." "Eli Boone." Her voice carried a note of affection he was getting used to. "I've watched you carry me through a snowstorm, nurse a stranger back to health, risk harboring a fugitive wife. You're many things, but a coward isn't one of them." He turned to look at her, and she met his gaze steadily. "That's different. How? Because he struggled to put it into words. Because you needed help. Margaret doesn't need me. She made that clear. Everyone needs their father, Lily said softly. Even when they're angry at him. Especially then. The conversation stayed with Eli through the evening, through supper and clean-up, and the quiet hours before bed. After Lily had fallen asleep, he sat at the table and pulled out a piece of paper from the drawer where he kept important documents. His pay stubs from Mr. Harlan, receipts for supplies, the deed to a small plot of land he'd once dreamed of buying but never could afford. He stared at the blank paper for a long time. Then slowly he began to write. Dear Margaret, I don't know if you'll read this or if you'll tear it up without opening it. Both would be fair. It's been 10 years since we spoke, and that's on me as much as it is on you. I'm writing because a friend told me I should. She said everyone needs their father, and I hope she's right. I hope there's still a part of you that needs me, or at least doesn't hate me anymore. He paused, crossed out the last line. Started again. Your mother would be disappointed in both of us for letting this go on so long. She taught us better than this. She taught us that family means you keep trying, even when it's hard. I'm sorry, Margaret. I'm sorry I chose my pride over you. I'm sorry I wasn't there when you needed me. I'm sorry I'm so old and stubborn that it took 10 years and a woman trapped in my cabin to make me write this letter. If you want to write back, I'm still at the same place. If you don't, I understand that too. But I needed you to know that I love you, that I think about you every day, and that if I could go back and make different choices, I would. Your father, Eli, he read it over 3 times, almost threw it in the fire twice, then finally folded it and tucked it into his pocket. In the morning, weather permitting, he'd hike down to where Mr. Harlan's ranch road met the county road, a 4-hour round trip, and leave it in the mailbox there. Whether Margaret ever received it, ever read it, ever forgave him, that was out of his hands. But at least he'd tried. When morning came, Lily noticed the letter in his pocket while he prepared to leave. Is that... Wrote to Margaret, he said, not meeting her eyes. Don't know if it'll do any good, but you were right. Had to try. Lily's smile was radiant. I'm proud of you. The words hit him harder than he expected. When was the last time someone had said they were proud of him? When was the last time he'd done something worthy of pride? The hike to the mailbox took longer than expected. The snow was deep and the cold brutal. But Eli made it, left the letter, and trudged back feeling lighter despite the exhaustion. He'd done something brave, something his Sarah would have wanted him to do. When he returned to the cabin, Lily had news of her own. I moved them, she said, her face flushed with excitement. My legs, not much, just... I bent my knee, Eli, bent it and straightened it. Watch. He watched as she concentrated, her face tense with effort, and saw her right leg move, just a small movement, the knee bending maybe 6 inches before straightening again. But it was deliberate, controlled, undeniably real. Eli felt his throat tighten with emotion. That's wonderful, Lily. It means I might walk again, she whispered. It means maybe I won't be helpless forever. He knelt beside the bed, took her hand. You were never helpless. Not for one damn day. She pulled him close then, wrapped her arms around him in a hug that surprised them both. Eli hesitated for only a moment before returning it, feeling her warmth, her aliveness, the way she held on like he was an anchor in a storm. When they pulled apart, both of them had tears in their eyes. We're a pair, aren't we? Lily said, laughing a little. 2 broken people fixing each other. Maybe that's how it works, Eli replied. Maybe you can't fix yourself alone. That night the cabin felt warmer despite the cold outside. The wind howled and the snow fell, but inside there was light and hope and something that felt dangerously close to happiness. Eli lay on his bedroll and listened to Lily's breathing even out into sleep. In his pocket, his father's broken watch pressed against his chest, a reminder that time had stopped once, but had found a way to start again. Maybe, he thought, it was never too late for second chances. Not for him, not for Lily, not for any of them. Outside, the stars burned cold and bright, and the mountain kept its secrets, and the winter held them all in its grip, gentle now, almost protective. like the world itself was watching over them. February brought the first hints of change. The days grew minutely longer, and though the cold remained fierce, there was something different in the quality of light. Spring was still months away, but its promise whispered on the wind. Lily was walking now, not far and not without help, but walking. She could stand on her own for a few minutes before her legs gave out. She could take shuffling steps from the bed to the chair if Eli steadied her. Every day brought small victories and occasional setbacks, but the trajectory was clear. She was healing. "Soon I'll be able to walk outside," she said one morning, her face bright with the thought. "I want to meet Clementine properly, and I want to see the mountains, really see them, not just through a window." "Another month," Eli cautioned. "The cold's still too dangerous and the snow's too deep. But when March comes, if the weather warms—" "When March comes," she interrupted, taking his hand, "I'll be ready." They'd grown comfortable with touch, small gestures that carried weight. A hand on the shoulder, fingers clasped during exercises, the way he'd brush hair from her face when she was tired. Nothing improper, nothing they'd have to explain, but enough to make clear that something had shifted between them. Eli tried not to think about what would happen when she could walk without help, when she no longer needed him. Tried not to imagine the cabin empty again, the silence returning, the loneliness settling back in like an old familiar coat. That afternoon, while Lily napped, a sound brought Eli to the window, the distant growl of an engine. Through the trees, barely visible on the valley road far below, he saw a black SUV moving slowly, as if the driver was searching for something. His hand went instinctively to the rifle above the door. The vehicle passed, disappeared around a bend, and didn't return. But Eli's peace was broken. Someone was still looking. He said nothing to Lily when she woke, not wanting to frighten her. But that night he checked the rifle's ammunition, made sure the door was properly barred, and slept fitfully, startling awake at every sound. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Eli was outside feeding Clementine when he heard the sound, boots crunching on snow, coming up the path. He turned to see a man emerge from the tree line, tall and well-dressed in expensive winter gear that looked too clean to have seen much use. The man was perhaps 55, with silver hair and the kind of face that appeared on magazine covers, handsome, confident, used to getting what it wanted. When he saw Eli, he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Morning," the man called. "Sorry to intrude. I'm looking for someone, a woman who may have been in an accident up here back in November. Have you seen or heard anything?" Eli's grip tightened on the pitchfork he'd been using. "Accident?" "A carriage went over on the high pass during that big storm. The driver's body was found when the snow melted enough for a search, but the passenger, she's missing. I'm her husband, Marcus Grayson." He extended a hand. Eli didn't take it. "Haven't seen anyone. I keep to myself up here." Marcus's smile thinned. "Of course, but you must have heard the accident. It happened not far from here. Storm that night was bad. Couldn't hear much over the wind." Still, Marcus's eyes swept over the cabin, the lean-to, the smoke rising from the chimney. "You've been up here all winter. Must get lonely." "I like lonely. Some men do." Marcus stepped closer, and Eli saw something predatory in his gaze. "The thing is, Mr. Boone, the thing is, I have reason to believe my wife survived that crash. And if she did, she would have needed help, would have needed shelter." He gestured at the cabin. "This is the only shelter for miles. Like I said, haven't seen anyone." Marcus studied him for a long moment. Then from his pocket, he pulled out a photograph. "This is Lily, my wife. Take a look, just to be sure." Eli glanced at the photo. Lily, but not the Lily he knew. This woman wore an elegant dress and pearl earrings, her hair styled perfectly, her smile polished but empty. She looked like a stranger. "Never seen her," Eli said, handing back the photo. "You're certain?" Marcus's voice had hardened. "Because if you're lying to me, Mr. Boone, that would be a very serious mistake. I have resources. Lawyers, investigators, connections at every level of law enforcement. If my wife is here, I will find her, and anyone who's helped hide her." He let the threat hang in the air. Eli met his gaze steadily. "Your wife's not here. If she survived that crash and came down this mountain, she didn't come to me. Marcus stared at him, trying to read truth or lies in his face. Finally, he nodded slowly. All right. But if you do see her, or if you remember anything that might help, here's my card. He handed over a business card, heavy stock, embossed lettering. There's a substantial reward for information leading to her return. $25,000. Eli took the card, glanced at it, then tucked it in his pocket without comment. Marcus turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. Lily isn't well, Mr. Boone. She has problems. Mental health issues, instability. She left against medical advice and she's a danger to herself. If you do see her, the kind thing would be to contact me immediately, for her own safety. With that, he walked back down the path and disappeared into the trees. Eli waited until he heard an engine start in the distance, until the sound faded completely before he allowed himself to breathe. Inside the cabin, Lily was sitting up in bed, her face white with terror. She'd heard everything through the thin walls. He found me, she whispered. Oh God, Eli, he found me. He doesn't know you're here. Eli barred the door, moved to her side. He's guessing fishing. He's got no proof. You don't understand. Her hands shook. Marcus doesn't give up. If he thinks I'm here, he'll come back. He'll bring people, he'll search. Let him. Eli's voice was firm. This is Mr. Harlan's land, and I'm paid to keep trespassers off it. Marcus has no right to search here without a warrant, and if he gets one, we'll deal with it then. You heard what he said about me. Mental health issues, instability. He's been building that narrative for years, laying groundwork in case I ever tried to leave. Tears streamed down her face. He'll have me declared incompetent, committed, and everyone will believe him because he's Marcus Grayson, pillar of the community, concerned husband trying to save his troubled wife. Eli pulled her close, let her cry against his shoulder. He called you unstable, he said when she'd quieted. But I've lived with you for 3 months now. I've seen you scared, seen you hurt, seen you frustrated and angry and determined. I've never once seen you unstable. That's because this is the first time in 20 years I've been free to be myself. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Eli pulled back to look at her, really look at her, and saw something he'd been too careful to acknowledge until now. Lily, he said slowly, what exactly did you do before you married Marcus? You said you ran a company, but... She took a breath. I built a company called Life Sync Medical Solutions. Started it in my 20s with nothing but a laptop and an idea. Grew it to 3,000 employees and annual revenue of $200 million. When I married Marcus, I was... She paused, the words clearly difficult. I was one of the wealthiest women in the country, worth over $400 million personally. Eli stared at her. 400 million. Yes. She laughed bitterly, and when I married Marcus, I signed a prenuptial agreement that gave him control of everything if I ever left. My company, my assets, my life's work, all of it would go to him. That's why I couldn't leave through divorce. I would have lost everything I'd built, so I planned to disappear instead, to start over with nothing, because nothing was better than staying. Eli sat back, trying to process this. The woman he'd been caring for, the woman who'd carved wooden animals and learned to walk again in his simple cabin. She was a billionaire, or had been. The carriage, he said. That wasn't just running away. You were going into hiding. I had money hidden away, accounts Marcus didn't know about. Not much, maybe $500,000, but enough to start over. I was going to disappear, change my identity, build a new life somewhere far away. Her voice broke, and then the accident happened, and I thought I was going to die alone on that mountain. But you found me. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted... She struggled for the words. I wanted to be just Lily for a while. Not Lily Grayson, the tech entrepreneur. Not Lily, the rich wife with the controlling husband. Just Lily, a woman who carved wooden birds and learned to walk again. A woman who could be herself. Eli stood, walked to the window, tried to make sense of his tangled emotions. Anger that she'd lied, or at least hadn't told the whole truth. Fear of what Marcus might do. And underneath it all, a bone-deep certainty that none of it mattered. Well, he said finally, turning back to her. "You're still just Lily to me. Money doesn't change who you are in here." He gestured at the cabin, at the life they'd built together over these winter months. "You're still the woman who made me write to my daughter, still the woman who thanked me for not making her feel broken. The rest," he shrugged, "the rest is just details." Lily's face crumpled with relief and something deeper. Gratitude, yes, but also something that looked like love. "What do we do now?" she asked. Eli thought about Marcus Grayson, about his threats and his resources and his determination. Then he thought about the woman in his bed, about her courage and her pain, and the way she'd brought light back into his dark world. "Now," he said, "we get you strong enough to walk. Because when spring comes and the snow melts, we're going to need a plan. And whatever that plan is, it starts with you being able to stand on your own 2 feet." Outside, the sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the snow gold and pink. The winter held them still, but beneath the frozen surface things were stirring. Change was coming, whether they were ready or not, and Eli Boone, who'd spent 15 years hiding from life, found himself preparing to fight for it instead. March arrived with false promises, a warm day followed by more snow, a glimpse of sun swallowed by grey clouds. But the days were definitely longer now, and the snow had begun the slow work of melting. Water dripped from the eaves, carved channels in the drifts, exposed patches of brown earth that smelled of thaw and possibility. Lily could walk now. Not far, and not without fatigue, but she could cross the cabin unaided, could stand at the window for 10 minutes without her legs giving out, could even make it to the door and back twice before needing to rest. Her body was remembering what? It had forgotten muscle and nerve knitting back together through sheer determination. "I want to go outside," she said one morning in mid-March when the sun was out and the temperature had climbed above freezing. "Please, Eli, I've been inside for 4 months. I need to feel the sun on my face." He looked at her, at the color that had returned to her cheeks, at the strength in her shoulders, at the fierce determination in her eyes, and couldn't refuse. "All right, but we take it slow, and the minute you feel weak, we come back inside." Her smile was radiant. He helped her into his spare coat, rolled up the sleeves so her hands could emerge, wrapped a scarf around her neck. She looked like a child, playing dress-up in adult clothes, and something in his chest tightened at the sight. The door opened on a world transformed by sunlight. Snow still covered everything, but it was melting, settling, and the air held a softness that spoke of winter's retreat. Lily stepped onto the porch, gripping the railing, and tilted her face toward the sun. "Oh," she breathed. "Oh, I'd forgotten what this felt like." Clementine, in her paddock, raised her head and brayed, a long, questioning sound. Lily laughed with pure delight. "That's Clementine? In all her glory." They made their way slowly across the yard, Eli ready to catch her if she stumbled, but Lily was determined. When they reached the fence, Clementine approached cautiously, nostrils flaring, taking in this new human scent. "Hello, beautiful girl," Lily said softly, extending a hand. "I've heard so much about you. Thank you for sharing your person with me." The donkey considered this for a moment, then stepped forward and allowed Lily to touch her muzzle. It was a moment of perfect grace, woman and animal, sun and snow, the mountain holding its breath around them. Eli watched and felt something break open inside him. He loved this woman. He'd probably loved her for weeks now, maybe months, but seeing her stand in the sunlight petting his donkey, he couldn't deny it anymore, and that love terrified him, because spring was coming, and with it, choices neither of them had wanted to face. That afternoon, sitting at the table while Lily napped, Eli heard a sound that made his heart sink, an engine, closer than before, laboring up the trail toward the cabin. He went to the window and saw the black SUV from weeks ago, pushing through the melting snow, coming straight for him. Marcus Grayson had returned, and this time he'd brought help. 2 men climbed out with Marcus, not police but private security, the kind rich men hired when they wanted something done without official channels. They wore expensive coats and expressions of bored professionalism, and Eli knew immediately that this was going to be trouble. He opened the door before Marcus could knock, stepped out onto the porch, and pulled the door firmly shut behind him. "Mr. Grayson," he said, "still looking for your wife." Marcus's smile was cold. "I've done some research on you, Mr. Boone. Turns out you're not even the owner of this land. You're just the caretaker, which means you have no authority to prevent me from searching these premises. I have Mr. Harlan's authority to keep trespassers off his land. You want to search? Get a warrant. I have something better." Marcus pulled out a document. "This is a court order declaring my wife mentally incompetent and authorizing me to act in her best interests. If she's here, I have every legal right to take her home." One of the security men moved toward the cabin door. Eli stepped in front of him, his hand moving to the rifle leaning just inside. "Touch that door," Eli said quietly, "and we'll have a problem." The security man looked to Marcus, who shook his head slightly. They were assessing him, Eli realized, trying to determine how far he'd go to protect whatever he was hiding. "This doesn't have to be difficult," Marcus said. "I know she's here, Mr. Boone. I had an investigator run aerial thermal imaging of this valley. There are 2 heat signatures in your cabin, have been for months. One of them is my wife." Eli's mind raced. Thermal imaging. Of course, Marcus would have those resources. The game was up, but that didn't mean he was giving in. "So what now? You going to force your way in? Take her against her will?" "I'm going to take my sick wife home where she belongs, where she can get the help she needs." Marcus stepped closer. "I don't know what she told you, Mr. Boone, but Lily is very ill. She has delusions, paranoia. She thinks I'm trying to control her, trying to hurt her, when all I've ever done is love her and try to protect her from herself." "That's a lie," Eli said flatly. "I've lived with her for 4 months. She's not delusional. She's not paranoid. She's a woman trying to escape a man who's been systematically destroying her." Marcus's mask slipped for just a moment, and Eli saw the rage beneath. "You have no idea what you're talking about. Lily is my wife. I've spent 20 years caring for her. You spent 20 years taking everything she built and making her believe she was nothing without you. She told you that? And you believed her?" Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "She's convinced you she's some kind of victim. That's what she does. That's part of her illness. She manipulates people, makes them think." The cabin door opened, and Lily stood there, holding onto the frame for support. She was pale but steady, and when she spoke, her voice carried across the yard with perfect clarity. "I'm not sick, Marcus. I'm not delusional, and I'm not going back with you." Marcus's expression transformed, concern and relief washing over his features in a performance so polished it would have been convincing if Eli hadn't already known the truth. "Lily, thank God, I've been so worried. Please, sweetheart, come home. We can work through this together." "No!" She stepped onto the porch, and Eli moved to her side immediately, ready to catch her if she fell. "I left, Marcus. I tried to disappear because you made it impossible for me to leave any other way. And I'm not coming back." "You're not thinking clearly. The accident, the trauma, you need medical attention, psychiatric care." "Let me help you. I don't need your help." "I don't want your help. I want you to leave me alone." Marcus's face hardened. He nodded to the security men, and they moved toward the porch. Eli raised the rifle. "That's far enough. You're going to shoot me?" Marcus asked, his tone mocking. "Over a woman you've known for 4 months? Are you really willing to go to prison for her?" "I'm willing to defend a woman's right to choose her own life. If that means prison, so be it." The standoff stretched for a long moment. Then Lily spoke again, and this time her voice was different, not pleading but commanding. The voice of someone used to running boardrooms and making decisions that affected thousands of lives. "Marcus, I'll make you a deal. You walk away right now, and I won't press charges for the accident. For hiring someone to tamper with that carriage, to make sure I didn't make it down the mountain alive." Marcus's face went carefully blank. "I have no idea what you're talking about. The driver's name was Thomas Whelan. He worked for you for 6 years. I have documents proving the connection, copies stored in 3 different locations with instructions to release them if anything happens to me. So if you want to play this game, we can play it. But you won't win. It was a bluff, it had to be. But it was delivered with such confidence that even Eli almost believed it. And Marcus, for the first time, looked uncertain. "You're making a mistake," he said. "Both of you." "Maybe," Lily replied. "But it's my mistake to make. Now get off this property before Mr. Boone exercises his right to defend it." Marcus stared at her, at Eli, at the rifle still trained on his men. Then with visible effort he smiled. "This isn't over, Lily. I have resources you can't imagine. I can make your life very difficult. You've been making my life difficult for 20 years. I'm used to it." He climbed back into the SUV, his men following. The engine roared to life and they drove away, tires churning through the slush and mud. Eli didn't lower the rifle until they were completely out of sight. Only then did Lily's strength give out. She sagged against him, and he caught her, held her, felt her trembling with adrenaline and fear and relief, all tangled together. "Was it true?" he asked quietly. "About the driver working for Marcus, about the documents?" "Partially. Thomas did work for Marcus. That part's true. But I don't have documents, and I don't know if the accident was arranged or just horribly unlucky timing." She pulled back to look at him. "I was bluffing, and if Marcus calls it, then we deal with it." Eli helped her back inside, settled her in the chair by the fire. "But for now, we've bought ourselves some time. He'll come back. You know that, right? He'll come back with lawyers, with police, with whatever it takes. Let him come." Eli knelt beside her chair, took her hands in his. "Lily, listen to me. These past 4 months, they've been the best months I've had in 15 years. You brought light back into my life when I'd convinced myself I didn't need light. And I'll be damned if I let Marcus Grayson take that away." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I love you." The words came easier than he'd expected. "I'm saying I want you to stay, not just until spring, but after. I'm saying that if you'll have me, if you'll have this simple life and this old cowboy and his stubborn donkey, then we'll figure out how to keep Marcus away together." Tears streamed down Lily's face, but she was smiling. "I love you too. God help me, Eli Boone, I love you too." He kissed her then, soft and careful, like she was something precious that might break. And when they pulled apart, the cabin felt different, not like a shelter from the storm anymore, but like a home. Outside, the snow continued its slow melt. Spring was coming, bringing with it all the complications they'd been avoiding. But for this moment, in this small circle of warmth and light, they had each other, and that would have to be enough. 2 weeks after Marcus's visit, an envelope arrived in the mailbox at the end of Mr. Harlan's ranch road. Eli made the long walk down to collect it, and his heart sank when he saw the return address. A law firm in Denver, expensive and prestigious. Inside were legal documents. A lawsuit claiming that Eli had knowingly harbored a mentally incompetent woman against her guardian's wishes. A restraining order requiring him to cease all contact with Lily Grayson. And a notice that Marcus was pursuing criminal charges for custodial interference. Eli brought the papers back to the cabin and laid them on the table. Lily read through them with a lawyer's eye. She'd dealt with enough contracts in her business life to understand what she was seeing. "He's trying to bankrupt you with legal fees," she said quietly. "Even if he doesn't win, the cost of defending yourself will destroy you. That's his strategy. Make it too expensive for you to keep fighting." "I don't care about the money. I care." She looked up at him, her eyes fierce. "Eli, you can't sacrifice everything for me. You've already done so much. I've done what any decent person would do. No, you've done what someone who loves does. And I love you too much to let you lose everything." She folded the papers with steady hands. "I have to go back." "No." The word came out harder than he'd intended. "We talked about this. We're not giving up. What choice do we have? If I stay, they'll arrest you. They'll take your home, your livelihood. They'll destroy you, and I can't—" Her voice broke. "I won't let you sacrifice your life for mine." Eli pulled out a chair and sat across from her. "Then let me tell you what I'm thinking, and you can decide if it's worth the risk." He'd been working on this plan since Marcus's visit, turning it over in his mind during long hours of chores and quiet evenings by the fire. It was risky, maybe foolish, but it was the only path he could see that didn't end with Lily back in Marcus's control. "We fight," he said simply. "Not just Marcus, but the whole system he's using to trap you. We get our own lawyer, a good one. We expose the prenuptial agreement for what it is, coercion. We bring witnesses who can testify to your competence, your sanity. We make so much noise that Marcus can't keep this quiet and controlled the way he wants to. Lawyers cost money I don't have access to, but I know someone who might help." Eli stood, went to the shelf and pulled down an old tin box he kept hidden behind his books. Inside were savings he'd accumulated over 40 years. Not much by most standards, but enough. $23,000 in worn bills. "It's not a fortune, but it's a start." Lily stared at the money, then at him. "Eli, that's your life savings. You can't, I can, and I will. But there's more." He took a breath. "I wrote to Margaret. Told her about you, about what's happening. Asked if she knew any lawyers who might take a case like this. Maybe pro bono or reduced rates. I don't know if she'll respond, but the sound of a vehicle cut him off. They both froze, listening. Not just one engine, but several, coming up the trail fast. Eli moved to the window and felt his blood run cold. 3 SUVs, police cars behind them, and more vehicles than he could count. Marcus hadn't come to negotiate. He'd come with force. "They have a warrant," Lily whispered, seeing the papers one of the officers carried. "Marcus must have convinced a judge I'm in danger." The lead officer, a woman in her 40s with a weary face, approached the cabin. Eli opened the door before she could knock. "Mr. Boone, I'm Sheriff Patricia Coulson. I have a court order to conduct a welfare check on Lily Grayson, believed to be on these premises." "May we come in?" It was phrased as a question, but they both knew it wasn't. Eli stepped aside, the cabin filled with people. Officers, a court-appointed psychiatrist, and Marcus, staying carefully in the background but watching everything with sharp eyes. They'd brought a stretcher, Eli saw with rising anger. They'd come prepared to take Lily by force if necessary. "Mrs. Grayson?" The psychiatrist approached Lily, who sat in the chair with quiet dignity. "I'm Dr. Sarah Chen. I've been asked to evaluate your mental state and determine if you're capable of making decisions for yourself. Do you understand why I'm here?" "I understand perfectly." Lily's voice was steady, controlled. "My husband has convinced a judge that I'm mentally incompetent so he can force me back under his control. But I'm not incompetent, Dr. Chen. I'm a woman who left an abusive marriage, survived a near-fatal accident, and spent 4 months recovering in the care of a good man who asked nothing in return. If that makes me crazy, then so be it." The psychiatrist studied her for a long moment, then glanced at Marcus, then back at Lily. Something shifted in her expression, recognition. "Maybe, or respect. Let's talk," Dr. Chen said. "Privately, if possible." Sheriff Coulson cleared the cabin. Everyone but the psychiatrist and Lily. Eli was forced outside with the others, where Marcus stood by his SUV, looking pleased with himself. "She'll be home by nightfall," Marcus said, loud enough for Eli to hear. "This little adventure is over." Eli didn't respond. He just watched the cabin and prayed that Lily's strength would be enough to save them both. The evaluation lasted an hour. Eli stood in the yard, watching the cabin door, feeling every minute like an eternity. Marcus made phone calls, paced, checked his watch. The officers waited with professional patience, and Eli prayed to a God he wasn't sure he still believed in. When the door finally opened, Dr. Chen emerged alone. She walked directly to Sheriff Coulson, spoke in a low voice. The sheriff's eyebrows rose, and she glanced at Marcus, then back at the psychiatrist. Their conversation went on for several minutes, punctuated by Marcus's increasingly agitated interruptions. Finally, Sheriff Coulson raised a hand for silence and addressed the gathered crowd. "Based on Dr. Chen's evaluation, Lily Grayson has been found competent to make her own decisions. She's choosing to remain here voluntarily. There's no cause to remove her." Marcus's face went red. "That's impossible." "I have documentation. You have a court order based on concerns about her mental state," the sheriff interrupted. "Dr. Chen has evaluated her and found those concerns to be unfounded. Unless you have evidence of immediate danger, my hands are tied. She's being manipulated." Can't you see that? This man, Marcus jabbed a finger at Eli, has isolated her, convinced her that I'm the enemy. It's classic manipulation, and you're falling for it. Mr. Grayson, Dr. Chen stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. I've been a psychiatrist for 20 years. I know manipulation when I see it, and I know genuine trauma when I see it. Your wife is experiencing the latter, not perpetrating the former. She's articulate, rational, and very clear about what she wants. And what she wants is to be left alone. This is absurd. I'm her husband. Being someone's husband doesn't give you ownership of them. Sheriff Coulson's tone had cooled considerably. Mrs. Grayson is an adult woman with full mental capacity. She has the right to live where she chooses and with whom she chooses. If you continue to harass her, I can arrest you for stalking. Marcus looked around at the assembled officers, at Dr. Chen's unyielding expression, at Eli's carefully neutral face. He was losing, and he knew it. But men like Marcus didn't lose gracefully. Fine, he said, his voice tight with suppressed rage. But this isn't over. I'll be back with better lawyers, better documentation. I'll prove she's being coerced, and when I do, he looked directly at Eli, you'll pay for this. You'll lose everything. Maybe, Eli said quietly. But at least I'll be able to look at myself in the mirror. Marcus climbed into his SUV and drove away, tires spinning in the mud, spraying dirt. The other vehicles followed, and slowly the cabin yard emptied until only Eli, the sheriff, and Dr. Chen remained. Mr. Boone, Sheriff Coulson approached him. I need you to understand something. What happened here today, it was legal, but it's not over. Marcus Grayson has resources and connections. He will come back, and next time he might be more successful. You need to protect yourself and Mrs. Grayson. How do we do that? Get lawyers. Document everything. And, she paused, seemed to be debating whether to say more. Consider marriage. I know that sounds calculated, but if she's your wife, it makes it much harder for him to claim you're holding her against her will or manipulating her. Eli felt his face heat. I don't want to marry her for legal protection, then marry her because you love her. But do it soon, before Marcus can file more motions. The sheriff handed him her card. Call me if he comes back. I'll do what I can. After they left, Eli returned to the cabin. Lily sat at the table, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had gone cold. She looked exhausted but triumphant. We won, she said softly. For now, Eli agreed. He sat across from her, took her hands in his. Lily, the sheriff suggested something. She said we should, that is, if you wanted to. He stopped, frustrated with his own awkwardness. Hell, this isn't how I wanted to do this. Do what? This. He stood, went to his shelf, and took down his father's pocket watch. He'd been carrying it every day for 40 years, and now he held it out to her. It's not a ring. I don't have a ring. But this was my father's most precious possession. He gave it to me when he died, and I've carried it every day since. It doesn't work anymore, hasn't for 30 years. But maybe that's fitting, because meeting you made time start again for me. Lily stared at him, tears welling in her eyes. I'm 62 years old, Eli continued. I'm not rich, I'm not educated, and I can't offer you the life you had before. But I can offer you honesty and kindness, and a love that won't try to control you or diminish you. I can offer you this cabin, this mountain, and every day I have left on this earth. Lily, will you marry me? She stood, crossed to him, and took the watch gently from his hands. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Eli Boone, I will marry you. He kissed her then, in the cabin where she'd learned to walk again, where they'd fallen in love without meaning to, where everything had changed. And when they pulled apart, Lily opened the watch case and saw something she hadn't noticed before, an engraving inside the cover. Time stops for no man, but love makes it worth the journey. Your father was a wise man, she said. He was, Eli agreed, and he would have loved you. Outside, spring continued its slow transformation of the mountain. Inside, two broken people had found a way to be whole together. And that, Eli thought, was miracle enough for anyone. They married 3 weeks later in a small ceremony at Mr. Harlan's ranch house. The old rancher stood as witness, along with Sheriff Coulson and Dr. Chen, who'd become an unexpected ally. Margaret didn't come. Eli had written to tell her about the wedding, but received no response, and that hurt in a way he couldn't quite name. But Lily held his hand through the simple vows, and when the justice of the peace pronounced them husband and wife, Eli felt something he'd thought was gone forever, hope for the future. The legal battle with Marcus continued, but with Lily as Eli's wife, the ground had shifted. Marcus filed motion after motion, but each one was denied. The prenuptial agreement, when examined by a competent lawyer, one Lily had managed to contact through old business associates, was found to contain clauses that likely wouldn't hold up in court. Lily's company was hers. Her assets were hers, and Marcus's control was built on threats and manipulation rather than solid legal ground. It would take years to fully untangle everything, the lawyer warned them. But time was something they had now. May brought the full bloom of spring. The snow retreated to the highest peaks. Wildflowers carpeted the meadows, and Lily could walk the trails with only occasional need to rest. She grew stronger every day, her legs remembering their purpose, her body healing from more than just the accident. One morning, Eli woke to find her side of the bed empty. He rose in mild panic, but through the window he saw her in the yard, standing by Clementine's fence. The donkey had her head over the rail, and Lily was feeding her something from her palm, talking softly. The morning sun caught in her hair, turned it to silver and gold, and Eli thought he'd never seen anything more beautiful. He joined her, slipping an arm around her waist. "You're up early." "I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about everything that's happened, everything that's changed." She leaned into him. 6 months ago, I was trapped in a life that was killing me slowly. I thought the only escape was to disappear completely, to erase myself and start over with nothing. And then I crashed on this mountain, and I lost the use of my legs, and I should have died. She turned to look at him. "But instead I found you. I found myself. I found a life worth living. We found each other," Eli corrected gently. They stood together as the sun climbed higher, warming the air, coaxing green from the earth. Clementine finished her treat and wandered off to find a sunny spot for a nap, and Lily laughed at the donkey's single-minded pursuit of comfort. "I have something to tell you," she said after a while. "I've been in contact with my board of directors, the ones Marcus couldn't corrupt or control. They want me back, Eli. They want me to take the company back." Eli's heart sank, though he tried not to show it. That's wonderful. You built that company. You should have it." "I don't know if I want it," she said. "Not the way it was before. Not the late nights and the constant pressure and the forgetting who I am in service to what I built." She took his hand. "But I've been thinking about what I do want. I want to create something new, something smaller. A foundation, maybe, that helps other women escape situations like mine. That provides resources, legal help, safe places. I want to take everything I learned, the good and the bad, and use it to help people." "That sounds like you," Eli said. "Using your gifts to make the world better. I couldn't do it without you. You showed me that strength doesn't have to mean control, that love doesn't have to mean possession. You gave me space to heal, to find myself again. You gave me everything, Eli, and asked for nothing in return." "That's not true." "I got everything I needed." He pulled her closer. "I got you." A sound from the trail made them both turn, the crunch of tires on gravel. Eli tensed, ready for more trouble, but the vehicle that emerged was a small sedan, not an SUV, and when the driver stepped out, Eli's breath caught. Margaret, she was 40 now, with her mother's eyes and his stubborn jaw. She looked uncertain, standing by her car, one hand raised in a tentative wave. Eli crossed the yard before he could talk himself out of it. And then his daughter was in his arms, both of them crying. 10 years of silence breaking like a dam. "I'm sorry," they said in unison, then laughed through their tears. "I got your letters," Margaret said when they'd pulled apart. "Both of them. The first one about writing to me again, and the second one about Lily and the wedding. I'm sorry I didn't respond. I was scared. Scared you didn't really want me back, that it was just, 'I do want you back,'" Eli said firmly. "I was a fool, Margaret. A stubborn, prideful fool. Your mother would have boxed my ears for letting this go on so long. She would have boxed both our ears." Margaret said, smiling through her tears. "We're both too much like you." Lily joined them, and Eli introduced his daughter to his wife, and something that had been broken in him for a decade began, finally, to mend. They talked through the morning and into the afternoon, Margaret and her husband, her 2 children, the life she'd built, Eli and Lily and their plans for the future. The cabin felt full in a way it never had before, full of voices and laughter and the possibility of healing. That evening, after Margaret had left with promises to visit again soon, Eli and Lily sat on the porch and watched the stars emerge. Clementine brayed from her lean-to, settling in for the night. Somewhere in the distance an owl called. "Do you ever regret it?" Lily asked. "Taking me in, upending your quiet life?" Eli thought about the man he'd been 6 months ago, alone, certain his life was over, waiting for the end in a cabin at the top of the world. Then he thought about the man he was now, husband, ally, maybe soon to be grandfather again, if Margaret's hints were any indication. "Not for 1 second, he said. "You saved me just as much as I saved you. Then I guess we're even." "I guess we are." They sat in comfortable silence as the night deepened and the stars burned bright. Inside, the cabin waited, warm and welcoming, filled with the artifacts of their shared life. A carved donkey on the shelf, a broken pocket watch that had witnessed their vows, a wooden tray that had served countless meals, simple things, all of them. But together, they told a story of survival and love, of 2 people who'd found each other when they needed it most, of a winter that had healed instead of destroyed, and that, Eli Boone thought, was a story worth living.